Hey, Steve,
What, John?
why are they called seagulls?
I don't know why.
Because if they flew over the bay, they'd be bagels.
Oh, dude. Hello and welcome to Engage, a family gaming podcast. This is episode 131, and I am your host, Stephen Duetzmann. As always, this is the official video game and board game podcast for EngageFamilyGaming.com. EFG is a website where parents like myself and my co-hosts come together to give parents and families the information they need to get their family game on. This week, it's a fireside chat. I am joined by the man behind the curtain, John Tomlinson. How are you, sir?
I don't know which thing I have more feels for, the ending of Avengers or the ending of God of War.
All right, so we're not going to talk about any endings of anything. There will be no spoilers. However, if you want to hear about my feelings on Avengers, I recommend that you go listen to the back half of Geeking with the Moms, because I had feelings and thoughts, and apparently so does Regina. It made her feel a certain kind of way. And so, yeah. Let me give you a spoiler. We talk about the Bechdel test, which, by the way, it fails.
Oh, yeah.
Go figure. A movie with, like 8 super crazy, borderline feminist icons in the same movie, and it fails the Bechdel test. But that's just because nobody has enough time. Because there's a million of them. And so, just to give you an idea, the shenanigans, it was pretty impressive. So we said some things. I still love that movie, and I think everyone is required to watch it if you like superhero movies.
I've seen it twice already.
Yeah, me too. And I think everyone should go see it. So when is San Diego Comic-Con?
San Diego.
I think that's sometime in July. Can you Google it up? Because I think that it is safe to say, because at some point Marvel...
July 19th.
July 19th, okay. Because at some point Marvel and Disney are going to say, okay, we're cool spoiling this.
Yeah.
Like at some point...
They're going to announce the title then for part 2.
So, guys and ladies, if you care about spoilers, some people don't. Yeah. I generally don't, but there are a few things that I care about. Go see it before July 19th, because at that point the gloves are off and everybody's gonna go crazy. But anyway, welcome to Avengers Cast. So anyway, this is a video game podcast this week. Last week we had a great show. Rob and I had the folks from the Runaway Parade, otherwise known as Runaway Parade Games. It's not actually the Runaway Parade. That'd be their WWE tag team. But they talked about their Kickstarter, which is still live and kicking and doing very well. So if you want to play Fire Tower, or if you're interested in playing a game where you control fire and firefighters at the same time, go back and listen to last week's episode. Frankly, go back and listen to last week's episode regardless. We'd love the download. So... before we go too much farther, though, John, I do want to take a moment to thank the listeners. So, listeners, thank you for listening this week. We hope that the games you've been playing have been great. Mr. Tomlinson and I have played some really good games this past week.
Same here.
So, the one thing we would like is we want to make our podcast more interactive. So, please feel free to reach out to us on social media or email us at EFGpodcast@EngageFamilyGaming.com or editor@EngageFamilyGaming.com with any comments, questions, or topic suggestions. However, I have a special one now because we're coming up on our E3 predictions episode. So I want to hear your suggestions. I want to hear your predictions. So email us. I think probably the best thing to do is to message me on Facebook. The more I think about it, is sending a message to the Facebook page. Do that. And tell us what you predict will happen. I want to read some fan predictions so more people will get things right other than me. Because I'm not going to get things right because I'm terrible.
Yeah, but I do.
Yeah. You do. Metroid. You called it. Good luck this year, because most of all the things spoiled by Walmart off limits. this year.
Oh yeah, exactly.
So I'm just saying. But anyway, so please shoot us an email. Let us know what your or Facebook message, etc. Maybe even join the community at engagefamilygaming.com/community. Let us know what your thoughts are. So, as many of you already know, we alternate our topics: video games, board games. This week, video games. Specifically, we have 2 topics today. One, we're going to briefly go over Nintendo's online plans and our opinions about it, and then we're going to take a break. And then after that, I have an interview with the man behind Mightier. Now, Mightier is a company based out of Boston that uses video games to help treat children with mental illnesses like anxiety and outbursts, autism, ADHD, etc. It is a fascinating discussion where we talk a lot about some of the usefulness of video games in that treatment, some of their strengths and weaknesses, etc. I am fascinated by it, and I hope that you will too. And we talk a lot about Race the Sun, which is a very good game. If you haven't played it, YouTube it. It's pretty good. So, before we do any of that, though, we're going to go around the horn. Mr. Tomlinson, I will give you a few moments to finish your discussion about God of War before we.
It is the greatest journey in video games I've played. That's what I'm going to go with. It's a continuous shot, just like a movie. You'll see the camera pan around you and push in on stuff. But the way everything walks, the way everything talks, it's just straight up a father and son journey where they not only discover their past and future, but they discover each other. And the way things are, the son and father have this majorly strained relationship. And in the opening scene, the mother has already passed. And the father takes him on a tutorial hunting to see if he's ready to take the journey. My father had not even completed that, and he was already just like, oh, I did this. He was so excited. And there's a scene where something epic happens in the background, and like the son's a little sad, and you see Kratos reach over to console Atreus for a second, and then reach back, and that's like sets the tone for the game, where slowly but surely they find each other, and it's one of the most heartwarming stories. In between, there's a lot of beating them up, but most of the monsters in it are much like the monsters that were in Suicide Squad. They are faceless beings, or like witch floaty things type of stuff. But the story is beyond everything you know about Norse mythology is in it, period. Like, I can't spoil it, but damn, like, everything's there. And it's amazing.
Listen, it looks great. I can't wait to play it. I just have to, meet you somewhere and steal it from you. And everything sounds amazing. So here's what we have. There is actually a piece of content about God of War up on the website. God of War is starting a new branch of coverage on engagefamilygaming.com. We refer to it as One for the Grown-Ups. And so we're coming up with a better, and we're coming up with a better name for it, but for now it's called One with the Grown-Ups. And essentially we're going to be talking about some of the higher profile M-rated video games that come out each year for a couple of reasons. One, parents are part of the family too, and sometimes parents just want to play a violent game while their kids are in bed, and that's totally fine. And the other piece, and I think that this is important too, is that there are a lot of kids that ask about these games. And there's a lot of parents that really have no idea. I actually read today about a parent, about someone who does something similar to what I did, who was under the impression that the ESRB was a rating of difficulty and not like content. And these are just common misconceptions. I mean, again, there's a guy on my Facebook who is a friend of mine on Facebook who brings this up all the time. Like, they have to put "don't dive" signs in 28-inch deep pools. So we gotta talk about all this stuff.
So what is like M-rated mad hard?
More or less. She thought that you had to be 18 or more to play it because it was tough. And you know what? Some of those games are pretty hard. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
We're gonna talk about a lot of those things. Also, I have a group of writers who are really interested in talking about it. So we have a piece just kind of introducing what God of War is and why it is special. We have another piece coming within the coming weeks about the themes of parenting and why they think they are becoming more prevalent in video games today. We're obviously going to have a review. And we're going to be talking about other things: Call of Duty, Battlefield, Red Dead Redemption 2. Probably not so much news, but you can definitely count on reviews from us and maybe some other content. So that's a neat little start. I'm excited about God of War. It looks beautiful. Makes me. I honestly contemplated going out and getting a 4K HDR television and a PS4 Pro. I thought about it. It's worth noting. Yeah, I know. You have different responsibilities than I do, sir.
Just me and my cats.
Yeah, because I thought about it, and the general corrected me. She was like, "Son, listen, get that thought right out your mouth." And I was like, "Okay."
You did just back Fireball Island. So.
I did, in fact, go full Volcar. I did.
Yeah.
And you know what? I don't regret that for a second.
Worth every penny.
I don't know if it's worth it, but I don't regret it. So, so that is.
I can't,
go ahead.
I will drive up to go play that with you.
Well, absolutely. We're going to play it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. I am looking forward to it. So that's God of War. I am so hyped. It looks beautiful. But let me tell you about a game I played. The embargo lifted today, so I can officially talk about it. And the podcast doesn't come out for a few days anyway. So I played a game called Wizards of Legend. Now that name is generic as all get out. It is, but. Would you believe me if I told you it's the best Avatar: The Last Airbender video game I've ever played?
Well, I heard your thoughts on the last Airbender game you ever played, so
it's not hard.
Yeah, it's not hard. It's a pretty low bar.
It is definitely a low bar. Avatar games are generally pretty bad, but here's the thing: this game is really good. So let me set the stage. Nay, let me set the table for you. So, it is a roguelite game. Basically, every time you play the game, the stages and the maps are largely different. You play a wizard who is running through levels, and defeating enemies, earning money and chaos crystals in an effort to get more powerful as you play through the game. You have spell slots that you can equip with cool spells, and you can equip one piece of loot, basically. Like they call it a relic. And they all do different things. And the idea is you have 4 different spells that you can equip. And each of those spells can have a different element in them. So one of them is basically a melee attack. It's like a short range, like a slash. Another one is a dash. Another is like a general spell, which is, if it's just like your meat and potato spell. And the last one is your signature spell. You can equip. There are dozens of spells that fit in each of these different spaces, and you can equip up to 4 of them at the beginning of a run. And they all do different stuff. There's a shield one. There's like an earth shield that actually creates a ring of earthen shields that surround you that deflect projectiles, and if you run into enemies with them, it hurts them. It's just really cool. And it really feels like you are mastering the elements and just wrecking face. Eventually, you will earn enough coins The money you earn, you actually can find merchants on the maps, and you can buy spells that you can't carry in between games. So there are spells that are like improved, that are additional spells, like, you know, that were assigned to buttons that didn't have anything before. So now you have like a 5th spell, and they do just bananas stuff. And it's, you know, the idea is the only thing that you can keep in between runs are these chaos crystals, and over time you can buy some pretty awesome stuff, and you will, you know, kind of play through these levels, and eventually the goal is to try and get through 9 stages in one run, and defeat the 3 like wizard champions. And there's an earth guy who's like a tree dude. There is a fire person and a ice person, and you have to just cruise through all of them. Dude, this game is amazing. It's like it's under $20. It's available on Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. I talked to Evan about this earlier on, and he said that this is basically, you know, right now his game of the year. Now, wow. That's, you know, I mean, there haven't been a lot that's come out so far this year, but for him, this is his game of the year, and he's not sure that anything's coming out that's going to be even close. Because this is ridiculous. Now, if they drop Pokemon in the fall, forget about it, but I don't think that's happening. He loves this game. He loves everything about it, the weapons, the combat. It's done in like an 8-bit aesthetic, but it's clearly not an 8-bit game. It is a lot of fun. Also, 2-player cooperative. So the only problem is you can't use 2 full controllers. You have to use half of a Joy-Con in order to play multiplayer, which is very weird. But what are you going to do? So for those of you listening, we're going to have a review. Review will definitely be up before this podcast goes live. So go take a look at the review, hear what I have to say. This game is good. It is hard, but it is not impossible. And I think that this is one of those games that a lot of people will enjoy. So that is Wizards of Legend. So you played a little bit of the Destiny expansion. Is that right?
I was in a rush to try and play some of the new raid tonight, but I'm not that light level yet.
Yep.
But I played all the story missions, and it's pretty decent. It's they introduced Mars finally, so there's another whole planet, and interesting new enemies, which are just like reskins, like evolutions of the old enemies. And then you get this sometimes there's this like crazy power up, which is like a javelin that like explodes when it hits, which is pretty amazing. But you've seen war games, obviously.
Yes.
Okay. It's basically the story about this highly intelligent computer that is corrupted. So you're going to save it because the humans made the computer, so you're fixing the corruption.
Yep.
By the aliens. So
okay.
It's an interesting story. It's a lot of fun.
All right.
It's a little short, but you know, don't expect too much. You know, it's a couple hours, just like the other expansions.
Yeah,
but,
the big expansion.
Way more characters. Yeah.
The big expansion is going to be coming next year, right? Is that basically what I understand?
Oh yeah. Warmind.
Warmind. All right.
Yeah.
They haven't confirmed anything, but my understanding is that they're going to have it next year.
Yeah.
All right. So that is Destiny 2, the Warmind expansion. So now let's talk about Nintendo, because we love talking about Nintendo here. So this week, Nintendo finally announced, literally finally announced some of the details for their upcoming premium online service called Nintendo Switch Online. We don't have a release date. but I have some suspicions. But here is what they did announce. So, first, let's talk about the price, because I think that's probably the best part of it. The pricing is as follows. Individual accounts, which is limited to one membership per Nintendo account holder. 1 month for $3.99, 3 months for $7.99, or 12 months for $19.99. Very good price for people who are just one person on the account. If you have multiple accounts on the same Switch, like I do, then you're going to want to go with a family membership, where you can invite up to 7 people to join a family group. Each member of the family group will have access to Nintendo Switch Online, even across multiple Switches. Starting in May, you'll actually be able to go to Nintendo and build your family group. Now, I don't know what the rules are for that, or if, like, you could be in our family group.
Yeah.
I don't know the rules. If we can, you're in, buddy.
Yes.
You family. And that
I have no problem spending the $20. It's actually one we're gonna get into more of it, but it is a great value at $20.
I agree. However, $0 is better. So the I mean, I'm just saying $0 is better. If it's okay, we'll make it work. So it's it's $34.99 for 12 months for the family membership, which is, you know, I mean, if you have 2 people, it's a savings. So I think price-wise, it's great. I have heard some concerns on the internet, and I don't necessarily disagree with them, that the price is so low that it might actually be detrimental, because, like, they're not going to necessarily feel comfortable improving the service, because it's only so many bucks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that is a concern, something that we'll have to figure out. But what are you going to do? So that's the pricing. So here's what you get for your $20 or your $34. First, you get online play. Duh. Right from their site. Battle it out or compete with players around the world in compatible games like Splatoon 2, ARMS, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Mario Tennis Aces, and Sushi Striker: The Way of Sushido. They are selling Sushi Striker: The Way of Sushido hard. All over the place. So that's it. It's online play. You pay as part of it. It opens up the ability to play online competitively and cooperatively. Now, if you'll recall, many of these games are already free or will be free to play online before the service launches, and then once that's done, you will have to pay for them. So that's kind of a bummer. You know, all the folks playing, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe without having to pay for their online, you're going to have to pay for that, which is a bummer, but $20 really isn't that bad. So, and maybe, if you're only really using it during the summer or something like that, you buy 3 months at a time. It's not a big deal. So online play has never been Nintendo's strong suit. So I will admit that I am somewhat curious as to whether or not they can pull this off, but they have been working on it long enough. So I hope that they'll be fine. Especially, they got to get their online ready because of Fortnite, which is 100% coming to the Nintendo Switch. So,
and Smash.
Well, and Smash is the pièce de résistance, right? Like, they need Smash to be a hit, and they need, because it could be huge, and they need the online play to work for that. So yeah, it's going to be a big deal. So that's it. One thing, online play. Next, this is a mouthful. Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo Switch Online. That is literally the name of the feature. Basically, there will be 20 NES games with added online play. NES games with online play. Just put that out in your brain. 20 of them. So 10 of them have been announced already. So I will read them now. They are soccer, tennis, Donkey Kong, Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers, Balloon Fight, Ice Climber, Dr. Mario, The Legend of Zelda, and Super Mario Bros. 3. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Steve, Legend of Zelda is a single-player game. How are they adding multiplayer to that? Well, I'll tell you. Other people on your friends list will be able to spectate you playing these single-player games, and they'll be able to voice chat with you, and we'll talk about how that's done later. If they're talking too much trash, you can say, son, you do it yourself, and you can pass them the controller.
Which is awesome. Which
is just fascinating stuff. Now, the online play is added to every classic game. There's the competitive modes are obvious. Online Dr. Mario, please. Okay?
Yeah.
Online Dr. Mario is crazy. So that's just awesome. We're going to have a feature up next week, maybe even later this week, where we talk about the 10 games that we want next. I'll tell you what. I'm just gonna spoil 1/10 of that list. Ice hockey, baby.
Oh,
Ice
absolutely.
hockey. I'm all fat guys all the time.
I just want RC Pro-Am, man. RC Pro-Am.
Ooh, very good. Also, right? Also published by Nintendo. Pro Wrestling.
Oh yeah.
Starman.
Yep.
Oh boy. So they've announced 10. 10 more will be revealed at a later time. I'm guessing E3.
Yep.
Which will be super exciting. We will be very ready to report on that when
they don't have a exact release date, but they're saying September 2018. That's the official on Nintendo's website.
Yes, that is what they have said. So, all right. So that is, so that's the next feature. Now, they said that they are going to regularly add more games, which means some of these may be sunset. It's tough to say. But this is the Netflix of Nintendo games that we've been talking about. If they roll in with first-party only NES games, they do have room for another, I think, like 20, I think there's like 18 more. There really aren't that many first-party NES games. So if they're only going to have first-party games, then they don't have infinity options. But I can picture this with SNES games too down the line. So we'll have to see.
Well, also, the Nintendo Classic isn't all first-party games. So there's a possibility that some of this code will be rewritten for multiplayer, and
we'll find out. We'll find out. It could be that they showed us the 10 first-party games, and the next ones will all be third-party. It's tough to say. We'll find out. So that is the Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo Switch Online. A next feature is that the Nintendo Switch Online app is still in effect. It exists now. Listen, it's not great. I mean, it's not the best thing in the world. I would much rather...
Earlier you mentioned before, well, $0 is better than $20. This is what you're getting for $0. So,
yeah, well, I get it. This is what you're getting for $20 also.
Yeah, exactly.
I get it. I just wish, I mean, it really is, it is better. I would imagine that this thing would just eat the battery life of the Switch. So... Anyway, excuse me. So that is the app, and it is, it is what it is. I appreciate the stupid stuff that it throws out there for the, sorry, John. I appreciate the stupid stuff it throws out there, like for Splatoon, like it shows like how big of an area you have painted over, and it does it like in some obnoxious, like the way that it keeps track of the stats. Like at one point we had painted the surface area of like the Great Pyramids or something. Like it just goes crazy with the stats. I really dig that. Excuse me. So next, and this is the most contentious feature, and that's save data backup to the cloud. Basically, folks, right from their website. Save your data online for easy access. Details about this feature will be available before the paid service launches in September. Basically, folks, if you are a Nintendo Switch Online subscriber, you will be able to upload your saves into the cloud and then download them, potentially onto another Switch. This is going to be good for people who switch Switches. This will be great for families who have, like, for example, we've talked about this on the podcast before, the idea of we're going to have to buy multiple Switches for Pokemon.
Absolutely.
We're just going to need to do it. And you know what? The fact that the save data will largely be interchangeable between those two Switches is very nice. How about the fact that Switches are mobile, right? They're handheld. So the ability to lose one or have it stolen is it's possible. I mean, there's really no way around that. You can't avoid it. So I think that is, that finally they are adding it. This is something that was available on the PS4 forever, and the Xbox One. You had to pay for it on the PS4. Xbox One, technically, you just need to have a Microsoft account. You don't need to have Xbox Live Gold, so it's free there. PS4, you have to pay for it. Whatever, it's part of the service. We're paying $20. I think it's absolutely worth it. I would pay $20 for that if I had multiple Switches, even if I got nothing else.
I would pay $20 a year just for the games. Like that you're paying $1 per game to play a collection of 20 games that are going to move in and out. That's well worth every single penny.
No, I agree. It is this service is pretty rad. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it has its weaknesses. It needs to be improved a little bit. I mean, what are you gonna do? But I think for what it is, I think this service is gonna be serviceable. And obviously, we know they're gonna improve it. They're gonna keep adding more features or changing things. Because Lord knows, PlayStation Plus hasn't remained the same. You know what I mean? So that should be a whole lot of fun. So that's Nintendo. They finally gave us the news. Now, I'm happy that they did this now, because I think this would have been a fun vacuum at the E3, So absolutely. I'm very glad that they got this out of the way now. Can't wait to see what they actually bring to the table, because man, I need some good stuff from them this year. I'm just hungry, man.
Yeah, but it was just surprising. It was like a random Monday when they announced it. It's just like, what? Huh?
Yeah, I took a look at my Twitter, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, everybody's talking about this. Where's the link?
And then boom.
Yeah, boom. There it is. So that's our first topic. So Mr. Tomlinson, I think it's time for a break.
Excellent.
All right. So, folks, Mr. Tomlinson is going to say goodbye, because when we come back from our break, I'm going to be talking to Trevor from Mightier. So, John, say goodnight.
Good night. Enjoy.
All right, folks. We will see you soon. Bye now.
Bye.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 131 of Engage, a Family Gaming Podcast. I am still Steven. We're still talking about video games, but this time I have traded my usual co-hosts. I've sent them out into the ether and replaced them with a guest. One, Trevor Stricker of Mightier.com. Mightier is well, you know what? Why don't you tell me what Mightier is, because I know, but I'm sure you have a tighter elevator pitch than I do.
Thanks, Steven. Yeah, so at Mightier, we use video games to help kids' mental health. We have a type of gameplay that helps kids build emotional regulation and can be effective with symptoms like outbursts, anxiety, oppositional behavior, and even ADHD.
Awesome. Yeah, so we met while I was at PAX a few weeks ago, we had a very brief breakfast discussion before both of us had to run off to the different corners of the universe for appointments. And I was fascinated by the presentation that you gave me, because I had never... It all made sense, but I had never thought about it before, and I think that's probably an experience that you have with a lot of parents that kind of encounter you initially. Like,
sure,
it makes sense intuitively that video games and, working with video games, that you can teach things, because, I talk about that all the time, but I had never thought about the idea of using it to teach things like emotional control. It was just completely an alien thought to me until you showed me the data, and I was like... whoa. It was like, it kind of opened up a whole new world for me, and I would presume that you kind of have that epiphany moment with a lot of parents and stuff when they encounter you, right? Like, if they buy in, it's got to be an interesting experience just to kind of go through the process onboarding with them, right?
Sure. And, I think the thing is, a lot of families who struggle with these issues are really hungry for something that might help.
Sure. I absolutely. So why don't you tell me, let's start with just the basics. How does this work?
Sure. So kids play games.
Yep.
And they wear a heart rate monitor.
Sure. Okay.
It's a watch like a Fitbit or an Apple Watch.
Sure.
When the tension in the game causes their heart rate to go up, the game can sense it. And then what we do is make the games more difficult.
Okay.
And so to keep playing, the person has to calm themselves down. And what we found is that this intentionally calming yourself down in the moment exercises and strengthens your emotional regulation.
That's just, it makes total sense when you say it, but I can't, until you mentioned it to me and showed me the numbers, I would never have even thought about it. So you make these games hard, and so give me an example of like how you would make a game harder. Like what kind, so like, because that just seems kind of odd that you would just kind of, do you just mess with the difficulty controls? We're game design. You're a game designer, I'm sure, so you know how to make games hard. But like, how do you actually do it in a way that
Sure. So the interesting thing is, first of all, it's got to be really obvious and really visual.
Sure.
So the platform has these guys called lava lings that are your hot emotions.
Oh, okay.
That we work into making the game more difficult. Because for the person playing, they have to intuitively grasp, oh, this is something I have agency over.
Sure.
And now I want to exercise my agency. So, really, the heart of what we're doing is building a game mechanic around your inner emotional state. And to do that elegantly, it depends on the game.
Sure.
So, for example, a game that works really well is Race the Sun.
Okay. Which
is this sort of futuristic spaceship flying game where you're flying through some futuristic world. It's, a really well-regarded game on Steam, million seller, and it's on Mightier. Okay. And what happens in Race the Sun is when you start getting escalated, these lava lings start flying in on the edge of the screen and slowly start closing in.
Okay.
Until it makes it hard to read your peripheral vision. And because you're flying so quickly, when you lose your peripheral vision, it makes the game much more difficult.
Sure.
You can still play, and the goal is we want these things to be something that you could recover from.
Sure.
But it takes a lot of effort, and it's that intentional practice of calming yourself down that helps kids strengthen their inner emotional regulation.
Sure, and it gives them like a practical practical in air quotes, right? Like, video games are not, we're not building rocket ships, but it gives them like an actual use case for these skills where, they actually are able to say, okay, it's time to try and flex that muscle. Whereas,
right.
Just anecdotally, just thinking about it, and going to a therapist and them saying, okay, so you can breathe, or, giving them techniques, they're not necessarily in that super stressed out moment in a therapist's office, ideally. Right. I mean, I'm sure that happens, but, they're not necessarily in the heat of the moment there. So it may be hard for them to kind of practice it or really even know what they're trying to practice. Whereas Race the Sun is a very difficult video game, and it gets harder and harder because you are trying to race the sun. You will always lose. So I think it's a great use case because you can't win that game, right? Like, you can't win that game. So eventually it will be at peak challenge for every player on Earth. Like, no one's ever going to just beat it forever. Well, never say never, but so eventually they're going to be stressed out by this game. So they're going to feel stressed out, and they're going to be able to actually practice these techniques or develop their own in a real quote unquote environment. I think that's super fascinating. I love the Lovelings thing. Because the fact that you've personified their hot emotions with these weird comical characters, it's just it's got to be great for working with kids and helping them visualize these Lovelings popping up in their real life. So
actually, can I pick up on that point?
Yeah.
Because you brought up something really fascinating, which is one of the real strengths of Mightier isn't that the person will learn anything in the program that they wouldn't learn through a therapist or through, somebody at school.
Sure.
But the fact that they're playing video games, so, kids are being met where they want to be.
Sure.
The fact that they can actually see the impacts of how they can connect how they feel on the inside in the moment with what's happening on the screen.
Sure.
Often the real power is that it's a way in for these kids to understand what's happening in their bodies.
Sure.
Having a conversation after the moment's passed in a therapist's office or with your teacher or with your parent.
Sure.
The problem is you're not in the moment.
Yeah.
It's past. I mean, of course it sounds reasonable to say, no, I wish I hadn't bitten that other kid. Just like us as adults, sometimes we come out of a heated exchange and we think oh, I could have handled that a lot better.
Sure.
So often this really is a way in for kids to understand what's happening and that they have some agency over the situation.
Absolutely. I mean, it's got to help with transference, right? I've talked to a bunch of people that, deal with games in education, right? And so the big challenge with any kind of, game-based learning is transference. Are we going to be able to take that knowledge that we have gained and apply it to a real-world scenario? And that, I think there's, in this case, learning STEM topics from building Nintendo Labos or whatever is certainly something that can be done. And obviously with debriefing, etc., it can be done. But this is actually calming themselves down in a stressful situation. Admittedly, it's not a fight or flight situation, which we don't really want to simulate those, really. I mean, I guess,
I would actually push back against that and say it is a fight or flight situation because, when you play a video game, you experience stress, you experience tension.
Okay. No, right? You're right.
Being
you're right.
challenged is not a bad thing. What's cool about video games is the stakes are really low.
True. You're right. I was just imagining the idea of not wanting to put emotionally distressed children in a room with a bear.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want to do that.
Bears and children even if they're not emotionally distressed, that might not be the best idea.
Exactly. That's one way to make them emotionally distressed. That's one way to make me emotionally distressed. I wouldn't want to be in a room with a bear. But no, you're right. It's high stress but low stakes. Because because they're games, you want to do well because that's just the natural state of things, right? People understand, especially kids, understand when they're playing a game, they want to do well. That's just what we're conditioned to do. What you and I define as quote unquote doing well in a given game might be different, but we all want to achieve some kind of goal. Better games will provide us with, kind of clear goals for that. So I'm a huge huge fan of what you're saying so far. So let's talk about the science behind this, because one of the things that you made very clear with me when we met before PAX is that this is not just nonsense, that there's real science behind this, yes. Right? Because it sounds like you probably get some pushbacks from some folks that don't really understand that you guys are doing like real work, that there's this is scientifically validated and clinically relevant data. So tell me a little bit about like the data behind this, because this is not just a thought. This is, you guys have put real work into this, right?
Yeah. So that's a great question, because we make pretty bold claims, and I think looking at it with a sense of healthy skepticism is a good thing. Mm-hmm. So the science actually was started by my business partner, who's on the faculty of Harvard Medical School.
Okay.
And the foundational research started around 10 years ago with some researchers at Boston Children's Hospital. And, they noticed that the most common issue that would bring kids into the clinic were these aggressive behaviors. And, the current state of treatment really didn't have options for all of these families.
Okay.
There's the accessibility issue of the fact that there's 9 workers in mental health for every 100,000 people. And, it's one thing if you have access to Boston Children's Hospital, but most people in the world don't actually have access to Boston Children's Hospital.
That math checks out.
Thanks. There's also just issues with, things like meds. Besides having side effects, they don't teach skills. And if you stop taking meds, you can go back to baseline. And they started thinking of ways that technology could help with these issues. And they actually tried a whole bunch of different things. They tried toys, and they tried multiplayer video games. And so they did a study, a randomized control trial, which is the gold standard for science, a double-blind placebo-controlled study, where one group of kids, the experiment group, played Mightier as it exists now with the heart rate monitor. The other group of kids, the placebo group, played the same game, and they wore the same heart rate monitor. It's just the biofeedback was turned off.
Okay.
So it never got harder. But, you had no idea of knowing if it was because you were in the placebo group or just because you happened to not get agitated that day.
Sure.
And what they found was when they performed certain clinically validated scales. So, mental health is a little tricky. It's not like a broken bone where you can look at an x-ray and say, oh, here's where it's broken and here's
sure.
Now it's healed. So, they have these scales that measure things like oppositional behavior.
Okay.
Stress at home, which is often a great indicator for the acuteness of somebody's symptoms, because even if kids can kind of hold it together when they're out in the real world, they often come home and just totally fall apart.
Sure.
And what they found at the end of this study is the difference between the placebo group and the experiment group was hugely statistically significant.
Okay.
Parental stress, the stress at home, went down almost 20%.
Okay.
And what was really interesting was oppositional behaviors, and I usually have this number at the tip of my fingers. Oppositional behaviors went down by 40%.
So what's an oppositional behavior, just because I'm a layman?
Sure. So an oppositional behavior is an aggressive form of a behavior in a child where they basically oppose everything that you say.
Oh, okay. All right. So I probably should have been able to figure that out.
So it's fair enough. So the interesting thing is, obviously, this is the tricky thing about mental health. It's healthy to have some degree of these things, but it becomes, something that's clinically relevant.
Yep.
If it's above a certain magnitude.
Sure.
And, so the kids who were involved in this study all had some sort of diagnosed behavior issues. And, they often don't, there's ethical reasons with just, you have a study with withholding treatment. And so often the kids who are, who can participate in these studies are what's called treatment refractory, meaning they have very acute symptoms.
Okay.
That aren't responding to treatment as usual, or aren't responding sufficiently to treatment as usual.
Okay.
So, the interesting thing about our science is, first of all, the way scientists work is if they see something interesting, they don't say, oh, that's interesting. What they say is, what happens if I try exactly the same thing?
Yep. Okay.
So that's happened. There was a group at Massachusetts General Hospital that reproduced our original research with an interesting twist. And the interesting twist is they followed up with the participants 3 months after to see if the effects stuck around.
Okay.
Because as you mentioned, the gold standard in teaching or in mental health is translation. Whether what the kid learns in treatment, what the person learns in treatment can translate into the real world, into the actual context. And so this study was amazing. First of all, they replicated our results.
Okay.
They found it was effective. And when they followed up 3 months after, they found that the effects had stuck.
Which is super relevant because that's not common, especially not with like medications, because once the meds are out of your system, you're back to the baseline in a lot of cases. All right.
Meds don't teach skills, and nobody would claim that they do.
Yeah, that's not what they're for. So I mean, that's fascinating. It's really cool that the kind of the proof of concept of the way scientists work, right? Like this is the ideal scenario, right? Like bunch of nerds
it's the opposite
did a thing.
Of video games.
Yeah, exactly.
If I'm like Zelda's amazing, I'm not going to be like I'm going to go make Zelda.
Yeah, you can't do that. Although, I listen, if that means more Zelda, I would love it if developers started doing that, because that just means more Zelda for me, which I would be fine with. Sure, go ahead. But that's not legal advice. That's just encouragement.
I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. Go find a good lawyer and then go make another Zelda. It's fine. I'm sure it'll be okay.
I can make this. I'm sorry, Nintendo.
Yeah, exactly. This podcast guy said that I should. I'm sure that'll fly. It'll be all right. Their lawyers will totally take it easy on you. So, yeah, I mean, right? Like a bunch of nerds did a thing and found a cool result, and then the fact that we got further backup from another group of nerds that did the same thing. Awesome. And that's, I mean, obviously that's the foundational, that's why you're able to do what you do and, why we have this product here. So here's a question that I have. So we know we have this valid scientific research, this clinically relevant data. And so you have like essentially the beginnings of a treatment plan. But the core of this product is the games, right?
Yeah.
Heart monitors, whatever. There's, bunches of those, and they're not hard to find a good one that I'm sure was suited your product well. Although I'm sure that process of selecting which one you wanted was probably painstaking because you're making a product. But so the games is the core element.
Slightly differently.
Yeah, they all exactly. And, they're all slightly different, but and I'm sure that was a pain to go through. But I'm sure the harder part is because this is the part that the kids interact with is the games, because the reality is I am sure a lot of parents are that once they believe that this might work, then they're like, what the heck is my kid going to be playing? Is this some game made by some lab technician? And are they going to be motivated to actually play this thing? Because we all know if you force a kid to play a game, they are less likely to enjoy it. What's going on with your games? So you mentioned Race the Sun, which I have personal experience with that game. It is very good. I've met the team that makes it at various events. So that's one game that's really good. But is that the only game on the service?
No. So we have 13 games right now, and we add one more every month.
Oh, okay.
The interesting thing about our approach is we don't develop games. We work with games from other developers that we integrate into our platform.
Awesome.
And, making games is very hard. Please trust me. I've done it for 20 years.
Oh, I know game making is hard. That's why I don't do it. So
what's cool is, there's a lot of good games out there, and a lot of them are very interested in working with us, because if you've built something, wouldn't you want to use it to help children?
I would presume that that a lot of companies would be super open to that. I think it makes total sense to me.
So, we work with, we have a lot of games that had long successful runs before they were on Mightier. Race the Sun is a great example. It's a really well-received, million-selling game on Steam.
Yep.
But so is Hundreds, which was this Apple Editor's Choice math puzzle game that was also, in the IGF. And I remember talking with the developers thinking, like, it's a math puzzle game with spare graphics. Like, will kids actually care? But one of the things we do is we play test.
Okay.
We don't rely on 40-year-old Trevor's opinion for what an 8-year-old will like. We ask 8-year-olds. And we had a playtesting session with middle school girls.
Okay.
And we showed them 4 games. And because I didn't think that they would like Hundreds, it was just, I gave it to them on my iPhone. And holy cow, the game that resonated with these girls the strongest was Hundreds. They were fighting over my phone, trying to grab it from each other over the office stone floor, which obviously gave me a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah, I would have been nervous too. I'd have been nervous too.
But wow, amazing reaction. And so, the interesting thing about what we're doing is we're building a game platform. So it's not a game, it's more than a dozen games. And, we've got our racing game, and we've got our puzzle game, and we've got our infinite runner. And, as anybody who plays games knows, the most popular, most successful game, so what is it right now? Probably Fortnite?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty safe.
It's played by less than 1% of all people who play games.
Yeah.
And the moral of the story is, if you take an arbitrary gamer, self-defined, say, yeah, I like video games, and put them in front of Fortnite, there's maybe a 1% chance that they'll actually have a good time. Maybe larger because it's a good game, but there's a 1% chance that they'll actually be playing it. And that is with the most popular game right now. So, the whole point of a platform is there's lots of things on there. And there's hopefully something for everybody.
And I mean, the law of large numbers, right? You keep adding games, eventually you will have something for everybody.
Exactly.
So what's the process like? So what's the pitch process? So obviously there are infinity games basically released every day on Steam. So like, do you have like a submission process? Like, do you reach out to them? How does that all happen? Like, what's the onboarding process? If I'm making a game, how do I get it onto Mightier?
So right now, part of making games for 20 years is I know lots of other people who make games.
Sure.
And I reach out to them.
Sure.
We do pay people. It's not like it's a life-changing amount of money. The developers who work with us really care about our mission.
Sure.
And they want to use what they've made to help children. So, most of the time it's me reaching out to people saying, here's what we're doing. Here's how I'd love to partner with you. Often developers, let me tell you what happens when you ship a game in the App Store. You get 100 emails the next day saying, try my advertising network, try my ad service for free players, try my review service that will get you reviews. And so you get kind of inundated.
I'll bet.
So, often I have to kind of justify what we're doing and cut through some of that skepticism, which is totally cool. People often want to check me out, Google me to see that I'm a legit person who's made video games for a long time.
Sure.
Might even know somebody in common. And then we have a discussion, how will their game change to get more difficult? How will we work it into our platform? Most people are pretty open to using what they've got to help kids. If there's a developer out there who's listening to your podcast who thinks that they have a game that's a fit, then just it's 2018. It's really easy to find somebody's contact information on the internet. Just reach out to me.
Fair enough. So, you add a new game. So how it's got to be hard, right, to add the Mightier layer to these games, right? Like it can't be easy, or is it? Am I overthinking this? Like,
it can be very difficult.
It can be? All right.
For it to work, it's got to be a very elegant addition to what's in the game. We like to think that most kids aren't really aware that this is something that was added after the fact. We like to think that. It's not necessarily always the case. But, part of keeping ourselves honest is we often ask kids, would you rather we just got rid of this gauge, got rid of the lava lings, and you just played without it?
Sure.
And they say no. They say this is a really interesting mechanic. This is like a fascinating thing that like no other game has. Which, as a game designer, it's awesome. It's like it's super validating. Now I think when it comes to actually designing these, it really depends on the game, and it depends on how much we're messing with the game mechanics. So, sometimes with Race the Sun, adding lavalings on the screen, that's one level of complexity. We've got to draw more stuff on the screen, which obviously that's a very graphically involved game, so drawing more things is tough. We've got to make sure we don't make it instant death, where the moment this comes on the screen, you die, because that'd
be a little harsh. Hey, you're stressed out.
Some games are even more difficult because, we've got to go in and tweak the difficulty curve.
Sure.
And figure out exactly what the game did and then play test it to make sure that, it's actually getting more difficult.
Which is where there's an advantage to the fact that you've been making games for a long time. You can apply the skills that you learned making games to essentially make a game. I mean, you're taking somebody else's baby and kind of making it the Mightier edition of that game, which, I mean, that sounds fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you call them people's babies, because, when you're a creative person, you spend a lot of your energy, of your time building these things, and they really are your babies. Mm-hmm. And, one of the challenges with wooing developers to work with us is, we're going to make changes to your game. And they have to feel comfortable with us.
Yeah. I've spoken to, I've been doing, as long as I've been doing this, I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of, be it, video game developers, be it indie or otherwise, but also a lot of, board game developers too. And that's the one unifying theme. Like, if you are the creative person that is making a game, that is essentially your kid. And truthfully, that's how I feel about my podcast and my website, so I can totally understand how they feel. And so the idea of having somebody come in and, kind of go under the hood, that I could imagine that would take a certain level of trust. And I think it probably is, not dissimilar to the level of trust that some parents would have to have in order to let you kind of go under the hood of their kid. Because there's got to be some level of skepticism with the parents. Like, how does a parent find you? Do they just kind of Google you up and find you online? Do you have clinicians that recommend you? Like, how does obviously parents are going to listen to this, and they're going to go to mightier.com. By the way, go to mightier.com and check it out if this is something you're interested in. But so how else do you guys get found? I mean, do you have a network of clinicians that are aware of you? Do you have an outreach program with medical professionals? What's that process like?
Sure. So we do work actively with a number of OTs, and if any OTs are listening and want to participate in our actual OT program where we try and take their practice into account and figure out how we can help you, then please reach out because I'd love to chat about that. We've worked with a number of schools, and what often happens is we'll do a pilot study where the special ed department will use us and then, oftentimes give us data that's helpful for us, like, how many times a kid is taken out of class. And so often the other families in the school will be like, ooh, why don't I try this too?
Sure.
We have very strong word of mouth. The thing about, I'm a parent, you're a parent. If your child has an issue and something helps, your chances are other parents who have a similar issue, and you're going to tell them.
Yeah. No,
somebody told you.
That makes total sense to me, and you're absolutely right. Especially parents that are struggling, with a child that has emotional concerns, right? Even ADHD. Parents of kids with ADHD, they're gonna know other kids because they're gonna meet them at the doctor, or they're gonna see a kid acting out at school, and they're gonna naturally gravitate to each other. That's just that's just how parents kind of form those groups. So I absolutely can see that the word of mouth is strong. Word of mouth is strong with games in general, so it fits. So it kind of fits the model. And if it works, especially with from what it sounds like that there's the potential for dramatic results. Man, listen, if I had and knock on wood, I've been very fortunate, but if my child had something going on and I was able to find something that was able to have a dramatic result, you better believe I'd shout it from the mountaintops to every parent I could find. And somebody would listen.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
We also work with a number of people who are in the space, who are advocates for what we're doing. So, for example, Leah Kuipers, she wrote a book called Zones of Regulation, and she's been very vocal about supporting us. She's actually posted to her Facebook page and her email list. And there are other people out there who also appreciate what we're doing and help us spread the word.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that I am doing my part to help spread the word as part of the podcast here. By all means, if you want to use my podcast as proof that you know what you're talking about, feel free to share that with all the folks that you want. I would love to get myself in front of them. So zones. So before I get too on a sidetrack here, you said it was Zones of Regulation by Leah Kuipers.
Leah Kuipers, yeah.
Let's see. I'm looking at. I just went. Anytime someone mentions a book, I immediately go and look it up on Amazon. So it's she wrote. So it's a curriculum designed to foster self-regulation and emotional control. It looks like that is a pretty good fit for you guys.
Oh yeah.
So that sounds super interesting in and of itself. So for my listeners who are interested in your product, I've got I'm going to put a link to this in the description, but it's mightier.com. That's going to give a lot of some of the high level details that you and I talked about today. It also has some trailers that I found for some of the games on the service, which I think is worth taking a look at. Just because you are right, now that I actually looked at it, I probably should have looked at those trailers before our interview, but hey, that's on me. So lots of cool games on there. And it definitely does look like a curated list of cool stuff. And man, Race the Sun is worth it, all on its own. Such a good game. And it's got the information for, the app and for the service right on your website. So this is something people can buy direct from you. Does this need any kind of a prescription, or is this a...
Nope.
All right. Well, there you go, folks. So that is Mightier, which I am super fascinated by your work. I was so excited that we got a chance to connect at PAX. I got so many emails before the show for appointments and things like that, and I got to play some really cool stuff, but I really think that the most valuable, 15 minutes of that entire event was getting to sit down with you over coffee and, have you show me that PowerPoint. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me then, and for talking to me now. Was there are there any parting words you want to throw out to my audience before we?
It's been great to talk to you, Stephen. I really love what you do with Engage Family Gamers. As a gamer parent myself, I know I'm often, the guy who answers questions.
Yeah, I think you and I end up being stuck in a lot of the same situations, answering questions. Have you been talking about Fortnite a lot recently? People asking you about that?
Yes, especially there was that article in the New York Times, the Fortnite Fortress, I can't remember, about how kids like playing this game.
Oh, yeah. Fortnite. I actually just yesterday published my parents' guide to Fortnite because it seems like every day I was getting a text message or a Facebook message on the page for someone asking me about Fortnite, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to write it down so at least I get a click every time so I can just refer them to my own article. Yeah, you and I get I think you and I get into a lot of the similar situations, being that we're, games adjacent. We know what we're talking about, and there are a lot of parents that are super lost. So, glad to know I'm not alone in the trenches. I'll refer them to you if you refer people to me. Sound fair?
Sounds fair.
All right, folks. So that's the time we have for today. I hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast as much as Trevor and I enjoyed recording it. Okay, folks. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Engage, a family gaming podcast. I do hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast as much as Trevor and I enjoyed recording it. We're going to be back next week for more talking about, this time we'll be talking about board games, because as you know, we alternate. So, in between now and then, I'd like you to do me one favor. If every one of you listening to this podcast would just find one person that you think might be interested in giving us a listen, please send that information to them. Send them a link in Facebook, tweet at them. I'm not really concerned with how you do it as long as it's legal, because more people listening to the show, bigger audience, means we get to do bigger things, and I'd love for you guys to be on the ride with me. So until next time, this is Steven and my guest Trevor. We hope you have a wonderful week, and don't forget to get your family game on. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Engage, a family gaming podcast.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week.